Well, it's finally time.
What's the Star Wars music? That's the one. This is now copyright claimed.
2 weeks ago, I started my Star Wars The Old Republic journey, and since then, I've clocked over 100 hours. And why have I done this, you might be asking? Well, 2 reasons. Number 1, I'm a massive Star Wars fan, and number 2, I'm a massive MMO fan. So on paper, I should really enjoy Star Wars The Old Republic. But this is actually my second attempt at playing this title. The first time, I got bored and quit, okay, I'm sorry. So will put myself through 100 hours change my opinion on this 13-year-old MMO, or will I find myself unable to get past the first 10 minutes? If you want to find out, stick around and join me on this review of Star Wars The Old Republic.
Then it does the little jazzy bit.
So let's start with some fun facts. Star Wars The Old Republic released on the 20th of December 2011, 5 days after the closure of Star Wars Galaxies. The game had 1 million subscribers within 3 days of its launch, making it the world's fastest growing MMO ever. It's set during the Old Republic era, 3,600 years before the events of Episode 1. It is estimated it cost BioWare between $150 to $200 million to develop. Only 3 Star Wars MMOs have ever been created, and this is the only one officially still open, with the other 2 being closed down. Although you can still play Star Wars Galaxies on private servers. But anyway, that's enough facts for now, let's jump into the game. So day 1 of Star Wars The Old Republic has you choosing between the Galactic Republic and of course the Sith Empire. And you know what they say?
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
So I chose to go Galactic Republic because I'm a bit of a role player and I wanted to be on the good side for once. You then have 4 different classes to choose from, or origin stories as they call them, and below that different playstyles which are essentially subclasses. So I opted for the Jedi Knight origin story and I played as a Shadow class. And I have to say, I was immediately disappointed. There are a variety of different species to choose from, with most of them being locked, and I thought they were locked behind a paywall, so I actually ended up buying the sub just so I could not be a basic bitch human. And to my disappointment again, a majority of the characters were still locked, so I had wasted my money essentially. I want to look like a fish face thing. Why can't I have the other people? How do I get the premium ones? In terms of customization, it's by far not the worst, but I do feel like for a Star Wars game, you're very limited on what species you can pick. For context, Star Wars Galaxies had 10 races for you to choose from, with each race having its own unique attributes, whereas Star Wars The Old Republic is purely cosmetic. And because it is purely cosmetic, it almost feels criminal that there's not more species to choose from. Which is strange considering they already have a lot of player models mapped out already. I mean, you can have a Wookiee companion, so how hard would it be to let you play as one? If it's a case of not having a voice actor, I'm willing to volunteer myself. Fuck's sake. Why have I even put this in the video? But anyway, back to the important task of creating a character. Oh well, alright, we're gonna be a blind fat guy. Oh, I like that. We shall call him El Plop. Let's go. I'm happy with that. I'm actually happy with that. I'm generally couldn't be happier. It's worth noting as well that this is a 13-year-old game with a strict naming convention, which means the name that you want might not always be available. What's another Spanish word for El?
A few moments later.
Okay, we're gonna be Soul Plop. Is that good or not? I don't know. I don't even know if people care. The game starts by fully immersing you within the story. You are part of the cutscene, you have choices to make, and it does a good job of trying to get you immersed from the very first 30 seconds of gameplay. I want his voice just to be like,
expert duelist.
"Keh." Is he actually going to talk? I don't want him to talk. I just want him to be like, "Keh." I defeated all of them.
I've never fought anyone.
Ah, ruined.
Including my
Ruined. Oh my
Impressive
god.
claim. If you're seeking fresh challenges, you'll
that's
find them.
horrible. That's such horrible voice acting. I hate it when they have a voice. I'm going to drop a bit of a controversial opinion when it comes to voice acting in games, and yes, I'm fully aware I'm saying this as someone who sounds as nasally and monotone as myself. But my point is, there's nothing more immersion breaking than when a voice just doesn't match a character, especially when the character is one that you've created yourself. And bear in mind, this game is notorious for being so heavy on the dialogue, and now I'm going to have to sit through 100 hours of me hating my character's voice. I mean, there wasn't even a slider to change the pitch. This just doesn't hit the mark for me, and I'd actually rather them not speak whatsoever and just be like the silent protagonist. The good news is, later on into the game, I do find a way to change his voice, which I'll talk about later, but for the most part, I wasn't overly impressed with the character creation, and yes, this voice is just going to drive me nuts. Let's see what the next 10 hours have in store.
This is where the fun begins.
I'll be honest, when you first get into this game, it can be quite daunting. There's a lot of stuff to try and figure out, and a lot of the UI is kind of messy. But this isn't my first rodeo, so I'm fully aware that MMOs of a particular age usually have the most scuffed UIs until you actually go ahead and fully configure it, which luckily the Old Republic allows you to do. It has to be said that the pacing of the game at the start is quite steady. You have a couple of skills to choose from, it's tab targeting so it's not overly complex, and as you level up, you'll start to add more skills to your action bar. It also became very apparent to me that the best way to level up was simply just to do the quests. And after a couple of quests, you'll start to realise that there are good and bad actions that you can choose, the light side and the dark side. Even if you are a Jedi or a Sith, you can still change the way that your character is perceived.
Thank you for keeping our secret.
Give me the crystal.
Just hand it over and we can be done with this.
Bloodsucker.
When you do choose light side actions or dark side actions, it actually goes towards your alignment bar. So far, I found no real use for this, but from what I've read up, it will actually impact some of the story and of course some cosmetics that I can unlock. When you do quest, you'll also notice there'll be certain caves and locations that you just can't get into as they'll be barriered off. They'll have a red wall, which basically means you're not allowed in there. This essentially means you have to do another storyline if you want to go into this area, which gives the game that extra bit of replayability. One thing I did notice quite early on is just how antisocial and solo this game actually feels. In the starting area there was other players, but there was no real way to communicate with them. Sure, you can type in chat, but I'm pretty certain they weren't seeing my messages, and it doesn't help that there's not like a pop-up box above your head to let you know who's talking. You are also introduced to the companion system very early on, and a companion is basically a NPC that will follow you around, and they can either be a healer, a tank, or damage. And I think 90% of players choose healer so that they can just face tank all the ads in the world. It won't be until later on in the game that I realised the companion's true potential, but in early game they just seemed like something to make you feel less alone. There's also a feeling which I just couldn't get rid of, and that was the fact that it didn't actually feel like I was in the Star Wars universe. Because it is set so far back in the past, it's hard to see references to what I'm used to now, which is obviously the current generation Star Wars. There was the odd reminder because I'd bump into a familiar species or someone would refer to me as a Jedi, but other than that there wasn't really too much holding me to that Star Wars universe. But that all changed once I got my first lightsaber, and it was a good feeling to actually finally feel like a proper Jedi. Shortly after that I was sent off-world to Coruscant, and all of a sudden my interest in the game started to peak again. Curiosity got the best of me, so I decided to queue up for PvP just to see what it's all about. And oh boy, was I disappointed. So my very first game was a game of Hutball, where basically you got to capture the item in the middle and score it at the other player's base. Pretty straightforward. The matchmaking decided that it would only be fair to make this a 2 versus 1. I was on a team of 2. Although, when I went to attack the other player, I pretty much did next to no damage. And I know this is low level, and I know I haven't got the best gear, but really? 0 damage? I was as irrelevant as the plot in The Last Jedi. By some miracle though, I did manage to score a point. That miracle being the other player leaving. But hey, a win's a win. I'll take what I can right now. And a big shout out to my teammate for carrying me.
I didn't do fucking shit!
I then queued up for PvP again because I figured it might have just been a bad matchmaking session. And what would happen next is I'll be put into a domination type game where I would have a slightly higher level player than me run away in fear. I know when it comes to PvP in MMOs, it's not everyone's favourite thing to do, but to actively queue for PvP, see another player, then proceed to run away, it annoyed me, if I'm being honest.
Hold on. This whole operation was your idea.
Like, I'd rather just die in a proper fight than have to chase someone around the map. So far, PvP wasn't really shining for me, and I know it's low level, so there's still hope that it could get better. But hey, at least I went on to win the game. After waiting 30 minutes, I did manage to get a game of Starfighter, which, to be honest, was a lot more fun than the previous 2 PvP experiences. I could see this game mode having potential, but I will admit the controls did feel a bit clunky, but the fact that I had to wait so long to actually get a game in the first place probably means I won't be revisiting this anytime soon. The more I played, the more I started to realise that this game was turning into a run-in simulator. I hadn't purchased a speedster at this point yet, so I was heavily reliant on one force move which I'd only ever seen once before, and that is, of course,
Let's go.
force speed. I know this isn't necessarily related to Star Wars The Old Republic, but why the hell do you only ever see force speed used once throughout the whole entirety of the Star Wars movies? It just makes no sense. But anyway, I'm happy to see that Star Wars The Old Republic didn't forget about this move. I was getting tired of the way my character was looking, so I decided to browse the in-game cash shop, and to my surprise, there was actually some decent cosmetics. I didn't notice any pay to win. From what I can tell, it was just purely costumes, housing, and pets, and obviously you can change the color of your lightsaber because that's very important. And I don't know what came over me, but I just saw something that I just had to have. I just knew it would make my playing experience that much better.
This is the way.
What the hell is even that?
So for the low price of $11.99, I became the Fat DeLorean. When it comes to this sort of monetization, I usually don't bother with it because it seems quite expensive for something which is purely cosmetic. However, as I said earlier, I'm a Star Wars fan. And I'll be completely honest, I didn't expect to suddenly fall in love with this game just because I turned into a Mandalorian. But at the same time, there's something that I really liked about my character now. Yes, he had body type 4 and type 2 diabetes, but all of a sudden he had a better backstory. And plus, his voice actually changed, so it was a lot more bearable.
Even a Jedi enjoys the attention of an attractive woman.
Okay, I didn't say it was perfect, alright? What I'm trying to say is that I just felt more immersed in my character. I could actually stand the sight of him now, and I felt more engaged in the story because of it. I had become one with the Chunker DeLorean, the Fat DeLorean, Diabetes DeLorean, I don't know. Comment below if you have a better name. It also helped that the storyline was now sending me to planets I've actually heard of, so overall it was getting to a point where, I dare say it, I was enjoying myself. But of course, I would have to go and ruin this for myself. I felt like it'd been a good minute since I'd tried PvP, so I queued up and instantly got a game. Things were looking good until suddenly they wasn't.
Bye, have a great time.
So yes, my teammate left, and what did the game do to help balance the team? Absolutely nothing, and I was left to fight 3 Mega Chad low levels. It was an experience. And I think what made this worse was just how thirsty they were to kill me. And the second round I decided to try and play hide and seek, but yeah, it didn't really work. But overall, it just felt like this is a fundamental flaw in matchmaking. There was no matchmaking. I went solo against 3 players and they called it a game. So, what are my thoughts on the PvP in Star Wars The Old Republic? Well, number 1, don't do it at a low level. And number 2,
And die, you fucking seagull bitch! Fucking.
so at the 30-hour mark is when the game truly started to open up for me. Well, this was when I discovered some key features about the game. I discovered player housing and how complex it was, and I saw the real opportunity here to do some roleplay. Not that I did, but I saw the opportunity.
My backpacks got jets. Well, I'm Boba.
I also managed to unlock a free house, which meant I was a endgame player now, but honestly, this is going to be an expensive hobby to do, so I just left it for now, just put whatever junk I had inside my humble abode. I also found myself doing more and more flashpoints because as I leveled up, I obviously unlocked more that I can play, and I was surprised at how popular these were. The only downside was that I was always matched with veteran players who clearly have done these dungeons to death, so they kind of ran ahead or snuck past most things, which I'm not against, I understand. Trust me, I've been there and done that in other MMOs. And the good news as well was that no one seemed to care that I wasn't max rank. If anything, they just let me be and didn't say anything judgmental whatsoever, which was nice. Like, once again, I've been in other games where people expect you to min-max, know all the mechanics, and not speak up at all. So to have people just freely let me do what I want to do was very refreshing. The good thing about these flashpoints as well was that they actually gave me decent gear. The problem was I was leveling up quite fast compared to what I was doing in the story, so most zones that I were in were just scaling me down, and yeah, I just wasn't getting any decent gear by doing the story, so this actually helped quite a lot. However, there's another aspect of this game that I kind of got addicted to, probably too much to, and that was of course the space missions. Although this game mode is quite simple on paper, it was more addictive than a can of Pringles. If you ever played Star Fox 64 or Lilac Wars for you Europeans out there, like myself, then you will be familiar with this style of combat, which is basically you're on a set course, you can only move around the screen, but you have all these moves that you can use. You have torpedoes, you've got lasers, and when you unlock more stuff for your ship, you'll have power-ups and buffs that you can use. And for whatever reason, I got addicted to the game loop. The thing was, there were daily quests you can do for the space missions. On top of that, having to upgrade your ship, which was a little bit of a grind. But not only that, the stupid thing was, there were certain maps which were actually difficult. And because there was some difficulty to it, it made me want to play it even more. And I probably have about 20 hours in the space missions. I'm not even kidding. It's dumb how much time I spent doing these. Another thing that I found oddly addicting was the crafting.
But farming? Really? Man of your talents?
I say I took part in crafting, but realistically, I just kept sending my companions out to go get materials which I just wouldn't use. And I don't know why, I just got addicted to doing this, to the point that I'm actually getting quite high up in it. I'm sure there's a good reason to do this, which is probably going to be making gear, but at this point, I just like sending these people out to do jobs. You can obviously gather materials yourself, but why do that when you have peasants which can do it for you? You are also limited to only 3 skills that you can have at any given time, but the idea is that you can swap and change between them, max them out, and obviously use them when you need them. Unfortunately though, I just use this as a send companion simulator, so I can't really talk too much about this. One thing that I did discover though is that you can have private conversations with your companions and try and seduce them. I'm not sure what level of romance this game has, whether it's like a Skyrim level romance, you know, get married, adopt some kids, very PG-13. Or whether it's more on the Baldur's Gate 3 side, so, you know, fuck a droid.
That isn't very reassuring.
All I can tell you is that, spoiler alert, I'm a bit of a stud muffin. 50 hours in, I was getting a bit distracted by quite a few different things. For one, I found out about the legacy system, where you can basically unlock special perks and abilities which will stay account wide. This includes fast travel, more XP boosts, and a few other cool bits. And there's a few other systems like this which you can grind out, and it actually adds to the playtime of the game because it gives you something else to do as apart from the usual chores of dailies and crafting. Admittedly, I'm not that invested in PvP on this game, but the Galactic season was something that I was trying to level up at any given time. It's how I got my free house after all. Quite early on, I actually found a Datacron, which basically gives you a permanent buff to your stats. And because the story was progressing and sent me to other worlds, I started to become more aware that these Datacrons actually exist on every planet. And I'd see like a glimpse of a shiny thing in the distance, and lo and behold, it would be a Datacron, which I'd have to solve a jump puzzle to get to, or discover a secret entrance in order to get it. With this came 2 realizations. Number 1, this game is so scuffed when it comes to jump puzzles. Like, Oh my god, it's so bad. The amount of times I got stuck trying to get somewhere, it was kind of frustrating to say the least. And number 2, why are areas so large when they don't need to be? Like, you'll go into a cave or, you know, a base, and it's just like the biggest area possible with like 3 or 4 ads in it. It just made no sense. Like, this can't be a good use of the server capacity, right? I have no issues with Overland being big. I mean, you're on a planet, it makes perfect sense. But for instance, this boss fight that I'm showing you now, it didn't warrant a room this big. I had to go from corner to corner to do the objective, but it didn't need to be this grand of a room. I appreciate it, but it just felt like such a waste, and this happens all the time throughout the whole game. And in terms of the story, I think I was getting close to the end at the 50-hour mark. I'm not too sure because it kept throwing me from planet to planet, and it got a bit tiresome because they'd make out there was this really big bad guy you had to go and kill. They would build up this boss fight. I remember one in particular, the mountain. Oh my god, the mountain's going to kill you. And you know what happened? Not only did he not kill me, he didn't even make my health bar move that much. And it makes no sense either as to why I was doing so much damage, because in theory, I was scaled down. And yet here we have the big bad boss who's been built up throughout the whole story, just getting nuked so easily. And the thing is, I know this game can be hard, because a couple of times I ran into world bosses, and oh my god, I practically got one-shotted. So yes, there is difficult content within this game, it's just not in the main story. And I don't know how I feel about that, if I'm being completely honest. So yes, I achieved 100 hours in Star Wars The Old Republic. Can I get some big celebration going, please? Sorry, cursed meme, whatever you do, just don't Google Star Wars chili ad. And yeah, anyway, moving on. So yes, I got over 100 hours in Star Wars The Old Republic, which now means I have 100 hours of wisdom when it comes to this title. So first up, I just want to say, by the 80-hour mark, I had finished the main story quest. And I know, some people can complete it within 30 hours, but they also probably skipped a lot of dialogue. But you have to remember, there is a lot of distractions within this game. Like, I was getting pulled from one way to another, and honestly, I didn't hate it. I liked the fact that there was so much to go and do. There are a lot of positives and negatives about this game, but in all honesty, I think it just comes down to the age of it. For instance, I wasn't a big fan of the tab targeting. I felt like if this game had action combat, it would shine so much more, but unfortunately, that's the direction they took, and it was popular at the time, and it's something that's just never going to change. So I can't really say too much about the combat because it is what it is. And it's the same for the graphics. You know, I bet this would look amazing in UE5, but at the same time, I don't mind the fact that it is a bit cartoon looking. If anything, it reminds me of Clone Wars. However, there are aspects of the game which I think could generally improve.
We've heard enough from you.
For instance, it's not a very social MMO, well, not to begin with anyway. It doesn't facilitate the ability for you to go and talk to other players and to actually team up and work together. PvP and flashpoints are the most social interaction you're going to have at a very early stage. For the most part, I reckon players just turn off text chat because it's just so clunky, and the default position of it and the default look is just so ugly. And it almost feels criminal that the only reason I joined a guild was because someone was spamming invites. They need to make an actual guild finder, and I know there's an unofficial one which you can look up, but that doesn't really count. If I'm a new player, I'm not going to go outside of the game to look for a guild. Which is a shame because there's loads of community stuff that you can do. There's roleplay, there's open world PvP, believe it or not, and obviously all the usual stuff like world bosses, dungeons and so forth. It's stupid that you have to go so far out your way to be social in an MMO. I think as well, the acquisition by Broadsword, in other words, EA giving up on another title, it does leave a certain level of uncertainty just lingering with this game. You have to remember, 2 other Star Wars MMOs have already been closed down. I'm not saying this one is likely to be closed down anytime soon, I'm just saying there's definitely some concerns about the content that it's going to be getting in the future, if any. So what are the positives, you might be wondering? Well, everything. It does a lot of the systems that you get in other MMOs so well. Despite having a cash shop, there's a lot of stuff you can unlock for free just by playing the game, and that's quite refreshing in this day and age. I actually think housing is done really well. It's not something that you can just buy from the cash shop, you have to use in-game money, which means it's more rewarding. And the fact that they're quite customizable, I'm not going to say fully because there's obviously some restrictions, but it allows you to run wild with your imagination and just recreate some scenes from the movies. I do like the concept of PvP on this game. I just think the matchmaking is clearly broken and needs to be rebalanced. But yes, having a PvP season gives incentive to actually go in there and PvP. It's shocking to think that certain MMOs out there still don't do this. And by far the biggest seller about this game is clearly the story. I'm not one to really get immersed in lore or just, I'm usually one to skip past what's being said. I'm not one for dialogue. But this one actually made me want to read, it made me want to choose certain actions, and I enjoyed it. And that hasn't happened in a long time when it comes to questing in an MMORPG. But most of all, let's point out what the biggest sellers about this game is the fact that it's free. You don't actually have to pay to play it, it's free for you to go and experience this. Yes, there might be certain restrictions, but honestly, you get a lot for nothing. So overall, I think it's a really good title. I think it's just very overlooked, and I think sadly it's been neglected over the years, and I don't think anyone can say with certainty where this game will be in 5 years time. But I'm not going to cancel my sub. I think I might play it a little bit longer just because I want to finish some stories and just see how certain things turn out. Maybe investigate the companion system a little bit more.
So uncivilized.
And on that bombshell, I'm going to end the review there. I hope you guys enjoyed this 100-hour review. By all means, let me know if you want me to do the same for any other MMOs that are out there. And just appreciate, this took a really long time to do, and hopefully you enjoyed it, because if you haven't enjoyed it, I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. And if you did get this far in the video, honestly, you guys are absolute legends. And hopefully I'll see you in the next review, and I'll leave a couple of videos on the screen for you now, so be sure to check those out, because you might actually enjoy them. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye for now.